it just feels like right now that Louisville being at home is seizing all of the momentum. I feel pretty confident in a Louisville win. The largest margin of victory in a Louisville basketball game since 2018. Folks, Louisville basketball is so back. We have finally confirmed it in a regular season game. The Cards are 1-0. Welcome to the Starting 502 podcast, brought to you by Mr. and Mrs. Bourbon. We're here in the Curtains Corner studios. As you can see, this is Press Meyer alongside Jake Hook. Just the classic duo tonight. Roman Bean out producing more radio shows and doing awesome Roman things. But Jake, how are we doing tonight, man?
I'm good, man. It feels good to start the season out 1-0. I remember was it our first game in the Kenny Payne era? We lost to Bellarmine in our first regular season game. Does that sound right?
Lost to Bellarmine, and then they lost to 8 other teams.
Yeah,
worse than the one before.
It was an assumed victory, but it was still nice to see, and it was nice to see us play so well. I knew this Morehead State team was not going to be as good as their last team. They looked a little worse than even I expected. I took the over in the game, and I took the Louisville spread. So the Louisville spread killed, but 2 minutes into the game, I was like, this Morehead State team's not scoring 50. They were so slow. There were 3 field goals in the first half. It was a struggle, but a lot of that's a testament to Louisville. So.
Well, yeah, and that's why when we were previewing Morehead too, it was like 12 minutes, and then I was like, all right, we just need to shut up because we think this is what Morehead might be like, but they have a completely new roster, a new coach, potentially a new style of play. And we saw, they had a lot in their bag. Like I don't think their coaching staff is in any way incompetent or, lesser than or anything of that nature. But just the way that they played was a bit surprising. But I think it also could be, they knew Louisville was going to speed things up a little bit. And so when you want to play fast and you want to dictate the tempo, I think the opponent wants to do the opposite oftentimes, especially when they have less talent than what Louisville has. So I think that might have been the name of the game there, Jake.
Yeah, I agree. I think we didn't really know what to expect from Morehead. We knew that there was a lot of unknowns. I kind of assumed since I know he was gone, the coach they have now was gone for 1 year, but was an assistant there for like 10 years. So I figured he'd have a pretty similar up and down, fast-paced style as their last coach, Preston Spradlin. But that was not the case at all. And I'm thinking you're correct. I think that was probably intentional. I think a lot of teams, especially when they're undermatched compared to Louisville, are going to see that, and they're going to realize, like, we can't run with this team. If we run with this team, we have no chance to compete. So we have to force them to play a different style of basketball. And I think that's what Morehead attempted, not very successfully.
Yeah, what I was going to say, too. Louisville proves once again that they can win games in a multitude of ways. Only 11 for 36 from 3. I say only, like we have become accustomed to them hitting 3-point shots in regular season games, which is not the case. I don't think it's going to be like that all the time, but the fact that you shoot 30-ish, 31% from 3, and you didn't necessarily allow the other team to dictate the pace, right? But you kind of just asserted your will. Louisville said, okay, they're going to slow it down. They got into half-court sets, and Louisville did everything that they could to disrupt that. They did a really good job of disrupting that. In your opinion, do you think that this was like the most complete game that we've seen of the 5 showings so far?
Yeah, 100%. I think that this is the first time that I think the defense was almost as impressive as the offense. I think the offense, through all the exhibitions, you've seen the ball movement, you've seen the equal playmaking, you've seen how deep we are and how many different guys are a threat to score and to facilitate in this offense. This is the first time that I noticed, like, wow, this defense is really good. Like, the pressure is intensified. They're up on ball handlers 90% of the game. They're in passing lanes. Their hands are active. So, yeah, I agree. I thought we rebounded pretty well. We got 14 offensive boards, so that was a good thing to see. Did give up 12, but I do agree that I think this was our most well-rounded game.
Yeah, you look at a guy like Noah Waterman, and to be honest with you, coming in to the season, he was the guy that we had a lot of question marks about because statistically, he doesn't really jump off the page. Like, yeah, he's got a clip. Like, he's a pretty good 3-point shooter, especially for his size, and he'll utilize that a lot this season. But yeah, I mean, it stood out to me that guys like that. I mean, his defensive intensity was great. He got blown by in the scrimmages a few times, and that did not happen that I saw against Morehead State. Yeah, like you said, the defensive intensity was fantastic. I thought that Corin Johnson, you know, uh, when Chucky Hepburn left the game, I thought that Corin Johnson was fantastic on both ends of the floor. I thought that there were some guys that just I don't know. I mean, we'll get into the individual players a little bit more later, but I mean, like a Javon Hadley, like a guy that you just don't even. He just had a quiet, what, like 15-4 kind of night. I
Yep.
mean, so a lot to love about this game. The crowd was fantastic. I don't know if it came through on TV, Jake, like it was in person, but it was nice to feel that again, right? Like we had not experienced that uh, really at all during the Kenny Payne era. I mean, there was like some uh, how would I put this? Like some faux generated, hype vibes from the crowds that were showing up during the Kenny Payne era, or at the end of the Chris Mack / Mike McGee's era. At the end of the day, though, it was almost like a sarcastic cheering. I mean, I will say Louisville fans are Louisville fans, right? Like I remember there were moments where we were down 12 against Florida State or 20 against Miami or whatever, and you got Joker and a Thief going, and there's still six or 7,000 people in the stands, kind of just giving it their all, even though they kind of knew what the outcome probably was going to be. But it was just different. Like it was back to the Yum Center was Yum Centering, as I said on Twitter. Like most of the lower bowl was full and very loud and active, and the players really fed off of that. Like it was just nice to see that environment. Downtown was really bustling. Like Jacob and I, hit 64 at Third Street, and there was traffic like an hour before the game. We got into the game, 45 minutes, 40 minutes before the game, and we had to wait in line to get our tickets scanned. We had to wait in line to get a beer.
That's
We
different.
people had to stand up for us to get to our seats. So that was different, right? Like,
Hmm.
you used to be able to own a whole row to yourself sometimes in the Center in the last couple of years. So all of that was fantastic. The vibes are so high, and I think it shouldn't go, without noting that life has been tough for everybody this year across the world. Economically, things are not great. Things can be a little depressing when you look at the political landscape and just life in general. Life can be tough right now. 2024 has been a tough year for everybody, and so for us to have this escape, right? Like that's how it started for everybody, right? It started as a passion, as an escape for us as fans, and it felt like we're finally getting back to that. Like between football, basketball, women's basketball looks very promising this season. There's just so much positive vibes around a lot of programs, but I think men's basketball is kind of leading the charge right now, right? Like it's I think that some fans reserve their optimism until they saw it like really in an official game against an official D1 team that could really kind of give you some trouble. And Louisville came out and had their, like I said to start the show, largest margin of victory since Southern in the Chris Mack era. A throwback. A shout out Jordan Wara. Shout out Stephen Enoch. Shout out Ryan McMahon. Darius Perry. That was the last time that Louisville had a win that was this sizable of this margin. And I think that against like a Bellarmine or some of these other teams that are about of the same caliber as a Morehead State, you can see much of the same this season. So um, you know, I mean, it feels almost weird to be talking so optimistically. But as we get into this, we'll dive into this game a little bit. We'll talk about the positives, the negatives. Coach Pat Kelsey said that there were a lot of things that he feels like they could take away as not necessarily being negative, but room for improvement. So he said Tuesday that was kind of a rest and get your schoolwork together type of day, and then today's Wednesday, they're back at it. Studying the tape, figuring out what went wrong, and I mean, I couldn't be happier about the direction that this program's going in. And now you have number 12 Tennessee coming into the KFC Yum Center for a quasi sold out type of crowd, for a whiteout crowd on a Saturday. I mean, what more could you ask for? This early in the season, coming off of what we've experienced, 12 and 52 or something of that nature over the last 2 years. So, I mean, can't ask for much more, Jake.
Yeah, dude, the vibes are amazing. I was gonna say, loved that the first play was designed. It felt like to get the crowd into it.
Mm-hmm.
Little off-ball screening action with I think Terrence
Mm-hmm.
Edwards and James Scott, and then James Scott or Terrence Edwards fakes a down screen, and then both the defenders go to him, and James Scott's wide open for the lob. Just loved
Yep.
how that kind of set the tone. And it was, I mean, it was nice to see the crowd translated decently well on TV. There were some shots where you saw you're like, oh, it's not as full as you want it to be, but the lower bowl was pretty full. And I mean, compared to what we saw last year, I remember the 3 or 4 times I went to the games over the last 2 years, it was buy the cheapest ticket possible because you know you're going to be able to sit third, fourth row, wherever you want to be in whatever section. So yeah, the crowd was certainly improved.
Yeah, and shout out to the student section. It was so we saw right going into football and basketball season. They do these packages. They sold out the student tickets, so that was a huge component of what we were looking forward to with the crowds going into the season. And then you go to the exhibition games. There's nobody there, right? Like there's nobody in the student section, and so I was a little concerned that that would be something to worry about. And that was not the case whatsoever. Students showed up, showed out. Shout out to the villains. Shout out to the student section. It seems like the vibes on campus are back. It seems like that's improving as well. I mean, from every angle that you look at it, I think some people were holding out just to see, like, what does this look like in the regular season? Is this worth investing my money in? The answer is a resounding yes. And I think that they're going to give Tennessee a hell of a game and have a good shot at winning. So we'll get into that in a second. If you had to, pick out two, three positives from this game that really stood out to you, maybe stuff that changed overall from the exhibition games, from the two games in the Bahamas, two games in the Center. What are you pinpointing as things that really stood out to you?
I think in this one, it was certainly more on the defensive end. We've seen consistently that this team will always be a threat on the offensive side with ball movement, with balanced scoring, with passing the ball. That's always there. But I think the fact that the defense looks so good, forced 21 turnovers on Morehead, only allowed 3 made
Hmm.
field goals in the first half. Morehead only shot
Yeah.
23% from the field. I mean, the defensive intensity clearly in my mind or in my eyes took a step up. You could tell that pressure on the ball was a huge emphasis. Hands in the passing lane was a huge emphasis. And that forced
Hmm.
so many difficult, I mean, just ugly looking possessions for Morehead, turnovers, easy baskets on the other end for Louisville. I think we had nearly 30 points off turnovers. And we only had 5 turnovers ourselves. So I think that was the best thing. We also had 6 blocks, which is not really something we've seen
No,
at all from this team. We've had
at
one,
all.
maybe two a game, but I mean, James
Hmm.
Scott, Kason Pryor had a block, Abubakar Traore had a block. I think Kanai Roos had a block. I mean, everyone got
Hmm.
into it. And I think that's going to be something that's going to have to show itself with this team because we aren't big. We don't have a great interior presence. So guys are going to be able to get to the rim at times with the amount of ball pressure that we force and how up in the passing lanes we are. So someone to be able to block a shot and be a threat to just make a shot difficult is going to be a huge thing as well.
Yeah, I mean, and what stands out to me, I think, some people settling in around us as the game's getting started. Everybody's worried about, what's the starting lineup going to look like? What are we going to see? And the thing that I came back with essentially was, I don't think it matters who starts on this team. I mean, maybe Jacob pointed this out a little bit. It matters a little bit more against the Tennessee, matters more against Duke, maybe. You don't want to get out to a bad start, but at the same time, this team is so deep, right? And that's what I think I was kind of the point I was trying to get to. Like before the first TV timeout, you already have subs coming in the game, right? And so in this Pat Kelsey sort of system, it's going to be kind of that like hockey line changes, sort of. Like they're constantly rotating guys in and out. Again, I'll point out the coaching staff. Pat Kelsey gives this coaching staff more than any that I've personally seen. Gives the coaching staff more of this autonomy to do whatever is needed, right? Like they kind of have their own jobs that they're doing. And Pat said, one coach, I know that previous coaches like Rick Pitino have done this where, one coach has the assignment for the next game. He walks out of the locker room after the post game speech. He gets a folder that has, this is the Tennessee prep work, and then they get to work for that. Pat Kelsey said, he wants to focus on one game at a time. They did all the prep work for Morehead State. All the coaches seem to have roles. All the coaches are up off the bench, directing, telling players where to go, communicating. When a player comes out, a coach is taking the player, by the shoulder, talking to him about what was good, what was bad, going over what they need to be improving as the game goes on, what they're seeing from the sidelines. Players are communicating with each other. Everybody's up off the bench. Johnny Kelsey. I mean, my God, dude's like almost running up with his dad, on the sideline, giving him the on your, on his head, type of cheers. I don't know if Johnny Kelsey's going to get the bench attack at some point. But he's at that perfect age, right, where it's like, okay, this could still be acceptable type of thing. But no, I mean, it stands out to me the way the coaching staff is communicating. Even against a Morehead State, against a Bellarmine type of team, there's still just a full focus on 40 minutes of really quality basketball. There was so much to like, so much to take away from this game. But yeah, really the depth. We talked all offseason about who is going to miss out on getting minutes, but really, I mean, the minute distribution. Kason Pryor's your leading scorer, leading rebounder. Had 4 assists as well, and he played 20 minutes. And so I think that's what the minute distribution is going to be. And I think that that's something that is going to draw players to this program, right? Like go in there and play 20 minutes of the hardest basketball that you can play. And if they can continue that, stay healthy, continue to rotate guys in like they are now, there's a lot of really good talent on this team where you can go 8, 9, 10, 11 deep and still feel really confident, really comfortable with who you have in the game. That really stands out to me. And even if there are injuries, even if there are concerns where somebody has to sit out for a game or play less time, I think that you're comfortable with that 7th, 8th guy on the bench. I mean, when you have Rain Smith, who was College of Charleston's leading scorer a season ago, who could be one of your better players, he might be like the 8th guy off the bench, and that doesn't matter to him at all. Like you can tell that guys know that they're going to play the minutes that they're going to play. Nobody seems to have any qualms with that. Everybody seems really supportive of each other, and I think that's what's led to this collective, kind of unity that we're already seeing in a team that most of these players didn't play together, right? Like they're all coming from different teams, and it hasn't mattered, and that's really unprecedented in college basketball. And I think that's the reason why nationally, outside of just the public national perception of this program being as bad as it has been, I think the one thing that nationally that people are going to pick up on pretty quickly is that it's this team is the depth of this team, the amount of players that can come in and make plays. Again, like I mean, Javon Hadley, Abubakar Traore, these type of guys aren't standing out necessarily as a top player on your roster necessarily, and yet they're coming in and just filling up the stat sheet, just doing their job. It's really truly is unprecedented. I don't think that people nationally understand and expected this to happen so quickly. So that's incredibly exciting to me. The other thing that stands out, you kind of mentioned this a little bit, Jake. 21-5 assist to turnover ratio is huge. That's more than 4-1 assist to turnover ratio. If you continue that, you're going to compete with every team on this schedule. They assisted 21 times on 32 made baskets, I believe. So that's. Did they have 21 assists in a game all of last season? I don't think so. I think
I cannot imagine that to be the case.
I think it goes back to 2020 during the COVID season was the last time that they had over 20 assists in a game. I'd have to go back and do some research on that, but just off the top of my head, I believe that was the last time that they did. I didn't know if that was something that was going to translate to the regular season, and apparently it really is. And really, the only baskets that they weren't assisting on were those breakaway baskets. I mean, that's really it out on the break. So, you know, again, like you talked about, the defensive intensity, maybe what stood out the most compared to the 4 exhibition games that we saw in the offseason. The fact that they really picked it up defensively and really kind of played exactly what we talked about a Pat Kelsey defense is like. There's a lot of pressure on the ball, a lot of pushing guys away from the basket. And it seems like this coaching staff and team have done their homework. They're prepared, for the opposition. I mean, if we're getting nitpicky for a second, right? I mean, I think the one thing that really stood out that was a bit of a negative was they allowed 12 offensive boards for Morehead State. That cannot continue. Um, if you do that against Tennessee, you're probably not going to win, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that is one of three things that I think bothered me, and three things
Okay, what
that
are
I
the
think
other
we've
two?
seen consistently throughout these submissions, and then now this first regular season game. Allowing offensive rebounds, which I think is going to happen with how aggressive we are on defense on the perimeter, and then also just our lack of size and physicality. Free throw shooting is still an issue. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, in the summertime when we noticed and in the exhibitions we noticed, it's like, I mean, this team has so many good shooters. Like they can't be a bad free throw shooting team. But when you look at it, and we played 5 full games, we shot 115 free throws. We're shooting 61.7% from the line. That is awful. That would put us at like
Yeah,
last season. That would put us as like bottom 3 team in all of Division One college basketball for free throw
right,
shooting.
right.
In games that matter, like this Tennessee game, if you're missing 10 free throws out of 28, like we did in the last one, those are 10 free points. You're not going to make all of them, but 5 points, at least 5 free points that you're giving up right there. And that can be the game against a team like Tennessee or Duke or Kentucky. So that concerns me. And then on the opposite end, we're still fouling a ton. 3 games in a row, we gave up 27 free throws against Morehead, 26 against Spalding, 19 against Young Harris. Those are teams that should not be able to get to the basket. And so that concerns me as well. And I know that comes with the physicality of our defensive play. And I do think the refs were really ticky tacky in this Morehead State game, especially in the
Yeah,
second half. It
yeah,
seemed like every possession, it was like one bump, foul. And you're like, what the? Like the game was so
yeah.
slow in the second half. So I don't think that was all on us. I think that was the refs dictating the pace of play a little bit. But those are just, we've seen bad bad rebounding on the defensive end, bad free throw shooting, and too many fouls in all of our exhibitions. And so those are the three things that are concerning me, because 1 or 2 games is fluky, but all 4 games that we've seen those issues.
Yeah, it's becoming a trend, and yeah, we spoke about that a little bit after some of the exhibition games. You know, one thing that stands out though is that this style of play is kind of conducive to those things. Not the free throw shooting necessarily, right? Like, there's really no excuses for the free throw shooting being that bad. Hoping that that will continue to improve. I mean, when you look at the way that this team shoots 3 pointers, right? Like in the first exhibition game against Young Harris, it was like a layup line from behind the 3 point arc, right? So, uh, the free throw shooting is, I think, the one thing that you can really improve. I think the other two things, Jake, are a little bit more of, the style of play that Pat Kelsey and the staff, like to implement, right? So they're always pushing, always trying to get aggressive, always trying to force a fast break. Even on made baskets, they're going to push the ball down the floor. They're going to try to create mismatches. They're going to try to catch the other team napping a little bit. So I think the offensive rebounds might be something that we have to get used to stylistically from this coaching staff and from the way that they like to implement, their style of play. Essentially, uh, I don't know if that's something that's going to change significantly, because I think that their thought process is this, right? If you score 35 points a game just by pushing the ball, whether that be getting out in transition, outlet passes, just having kind of that breakneck tempo and speed. Um, if they're going to continue to do that, yeah, that is going to lead to some more offensive rebounds. But if they can get 35 points out of that and only allow 25 points off of offensive rebounds, then there you go. I think that the fouling thing, when you are playing 10, 11 guys, 18, 20 plus minutes, then you have to kind of look at it as, you know, what am I trying to get to here? So, say Case and Pryor only has 3 fouls. He's thinking that he can still play aggressively towards the end of the game, even though the team fouls are starting to get racked up. So I think that instinctively you're going to play more aggressively when you have fresh legs, when you have more fouls to give personally. So I think maybe that is kind of a residual effect of the style of play. I think maybe we'll see. Maybe there's an emphasis on that, and they try to improve that going forward. But yeah, you're right, Jake. You don't have a lot of big bodies in there, so that's something that you have to sacrifice if you're trying to get out on the break, if you're trying to push the tempo. Ultimately, like I said, if you're sacrificing 20 points on offensive rebounds per game, you have to score 30 in transition to really make it something that is worth, you're kind of giving that away to get more points on the offensive end. So it could be something where, if you want to be more of an 80 point per game type of team rather than a 95, 100 point per game team that, we're seeing Louisville kind of becoming and evolving into, then you're going to have to, be focused a little bit more on offensive rebounding and slow the game down a bit. So, yeah, if a Duke or a North Carolina or I'm trying to think like an Indiana tries to assert their will and slow the game down and try to make it more physical, which I think that teams are going to try to do, then yeah, that's when, if they're able to do that, I think that that's when you need to have some concern and more emphasis placed on defensive rebounding, limiting teams to one and done type of opportunities. And I think that's something that Morehead State could have been focused on, right? Like, Louisville's going to try to get out in transition. Let's try to collect those, kind of free offensive rebounds, reset it, and, try to go again. So something to watch out for sure. But I think it could be a result. And I hope I explained that well, my thought process there. But I think stylistically, that's what it's lending itself to. Um, Jake, I know you mentioned that you have three guys that really stood out to you in this game. Uh, give me those names and what it was about each of those guys that really got you excited about us going forward.
Yeah, I think Kason Pryor, obviously MVP of the game, 18 points, 12 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 block, 3 steals. You have to talk about him after that game. I
Mm-hmm.
think these are the kinds of games that you can get out of Kason when he's got it going. I think he's a top 10 big man in college basketball. Unfortunately, he's a streakier player at times. So you are going to see some
Mm-hmm.
games where it's 3 points, 2 rebounds, 4 fouls, 2 for 7 shooting, 0 for 6 from the 30, something like that. But it stood out to me because he was able to affect the game in so many different ways. 12 boards, 4 assists, 3 steals. It wasn't just scoring. He didn't shoot the ball particularly well. I think he was 1 for 5, 1 for 6 from three, but was still able to get to the basket, roll really well, score in the paint, be physical, which we need him to be. So I liked that a lot. Um, I do wonder at times because I think that his athleticism and his size and his length and his aggression is great, but I do wonder how that translates against better teams that are not going to be beaten by him as easily because I don't think he has like the bag to just blow by people or the true athleticism to just blow by somebody. So I'm curious to see if this holds true against bigger name opponents.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Anybody else that was sticking out to you? I know, we mentioned Javon Hadley. What is it about his game that just kind of feels like he's just kind of going under the radar? At least maybe from my perspective. Maybe he's not for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think for most people, he will go under the radar. He's one of my favorite players. To me, my favorite one is Corin Johnson. Talked about him a ton, and then Javon's my second one. He just plays so smoothly, doesn't force anything, always seems to make the right play, be in the right spot, and shot really well in the last game too, which is something that I think is underrated for his game. He was a 42% 3-point shooter last year, but he only shot like a little bit more than 1 3 a game. So I think that's something that he has. I mean, the jump shot looks great. He was aggressive shooting the ball when he was open. 15 points, just 2 rebounds. But I was really impressed. He was more aggressive as a scorer, which is something we haven't really seen him do and haven't really needed to see him do. But I like that. And then James Scott, he only played 15 minutes because he was in foul trouble. But I mean, when he was in there, he was so effective. I think he had 4 or 5 dunks out of the 12
Mhm.
points that he scored, 5 boards,
Yeah,
2 assists, a block, 2 steals. I mean, when he's in the game, he's our best rebounder. Like, if we're concerned
yeah,
about giving up offensive rebounds, put in James Scott. I'm not nearly as concerned. When he goes to the bench, I'm a little bit more concerned. and I was worried about his fouling issues because if there's a position that we can get a lot of fouls and just
Mhm.
replace it from the bench, it's guard, it's forward. You've got guys off the
Right.
bench, Abubakar, Rain, Corin that can come in, and you're not really seeing that fall off. But if we're playing a team like Indiana with Umar Ballo and James Scott picks up 3 fouls in the first 10 minutes, I mean, we've got Noah Waterman, we've got Frank off the bench, we've got Kaysen, but those guys can't match up nearly as well as James can. So loved what I saw of him. Hated that he got in foul trouble, but I loved the game. He did everything that you want to see him do.
Yeah, another thing, and Jacob really was harping on this and pointed this out on Monday night, and I tend to agree with it. The one thing, there's a lot of roster versatility, right? Like there's a lot of ways that you can implement, you know, the positional versatility of this roster. Uh, One way that you can't, and we kind of saw it a little bit against Morehead State, was you really can't have Kadir Traore and James Scott in too long together. I know they're starting together right now, but I'm not sure if it'll stay that way because you have a lack of stretching the floor that makes this offense so lethal. If you have two guys on the floor that simply cannot shoot, and one of them is Kadir Traore, who is just 6'5", I think that that could be something that teams try to take advantage of, you know, kind of hedge out on the three guards that are in with them. I'm interested to see how they, you know, try to combat against that. Right. That's one thing to look out for as well as Louisville plays a team like Tennessee. Any other final thoughts about Morehead State before we get into number 12 Tennessee?
Not that I can think of. I loved the offense has stayed consistent. The bench scoring
Hmm.
has stayed consistent. 43 points off the bench, like we talked about. 21 assists, 32 made baskets. I think if that is consistent throughout the season, I mean, the wins are just going to pile up. Like when you're that efficient on offense, you're going to be in every game, even if you're not shooting as well, like we did on that night. Like we shot 31% from three. I think that'll probably be one of our worst shooting nights of the year, and we
Hmm.
still put up 93 points. So I think that's such a huge positive that as we took a step up in competition, it wasn't like, oh shit, we can't run this offense now that we're playing D1 teams. It was still smooth, and it'll need to be seen against higher opponents like Tennessee, the ACC, all that. But I think it was just nice to see you step up in competition, and the offense is still smooth as butter.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned step up in competition. With the step up in competition, with the official start of the regular season, we are officially locked in on Louisville basketball, like it's midseason, man. And that's why our team at State of Louisville and Starting 502 Podcast, myself and thousands of others are using Underdog Fantasy. Underdog's the best place to cash in on all your takes this basketball season. Which players are going off, which ones are ice cold. Make your picks in just a few taps and turn your sports opinions into real money. It's super easy, and you can win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on player stats like points, blocks, steals, and much more. Not to mention, Underdogs offers great games and rewards as you bet. With Underdog Rescues, you can get your money back and receive a promo if an early injury causes your entry to lose. This week, we do not have official picks that we can make quite yet as we head into the Tennessee game. Anything that you're looking out for, Jake, as we enter the Tennessee game that you think that maybe the experts, aren't necessarily locked in on quite yet with this Louisville team?
Yeah, it's hard to say because the lines aren't out yet, but like an over on a Corin Johnson scoring, like I imagine in the
Yeah,
first regular season game, he didn't score a ton. So if that's set at like 6.5, 7.5, I think that's an easy over. An over on Chucky Hepburn's assist, something like that. Trying to think over on some rebounds from a guy like James
yeah.
Scott. I think those are, but it's hard to say before the lines come out. But once they come out, we'll be hammering them.
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm looking for, if the Louisville individual over is anywhere in the 70s against
Hmm.
Tennessee, I'm going to hammer that. I think that's a huge one. Either way, Underdog is the best place to play pick'em. So sign up and deposit now using promo code starting5. That's starting and then FIVE, all one word, to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Not to mention, Underdog will be running specials, promos, and bonuses almost every single day, including profit boost, discounts, free picks, and much, much more. Higher or lower, you make the call. on Underdog. You must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alaska, Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, present in a state where Underdog Fantasy Sports operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.nbcgambling.org. In Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text next step to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. After the break, we dive into Tennessee. Can't wait.
Mr. and Mrs. is for everyone, from a more traditional 90 proof to a cash string that's smoother. In 2013, Russ going to the hole, and boy, could we use that right now. Mr. and Mrs. Bourbon covers tastes, all different taste and preferences, 6 different bourbons that they're offering. Be among the first to try Mr. and Mrs. Bourbon, the official bourbon of the state of Louisville and the starting 502 podcast, on shelves anywhere you find your liquor, and now online at mrandmrsbourbon.com.
Jake, Tennessee at Louisville this Saturday at noon. Number 12 team in the country, second game of the season, coming into an almost sold-out KFC Yum Center for a wide-out game. Tennessee, number 12 in the country again. 7 returning players, expected to be, again, another top competitor in the SEC. They have 4 transfers that have come in. We'll get into that here in a second. And then 4 freshmen that have come in. But, I mean, the main thing, right, they're looking for a way to replace Dalton Connect, who got drafted by the Lakers and is looking fantastic so far. And then Jonas Idu, I think is how you say his last name.
I do.
They were probably the 2 best players besides Zakai Ziegler on last year's team. So, really the main thing to focus on there is how are they going to supplement those players that they lost from the season ago. Dalton Connect, obviously, one of the best players in the country, just one of those cold-ass white boys in the SEC. Jake, you've been watching some of the tape. What stood out to you in their season opening win that was a little bit closer than the experts expected?
Yeah, Tennessee definitely did not cover against Gardner-Webb, only won by 16. I think that score is a little bit misleading. They were only winning by 10 at halftime. It definitely was a close game in the first half, but they were up, I think, 23-25 with like 5 minutes left to go. So just at the end, they got a little bit closer, but it was never a game in doubt or anything like that. What I noticed from watching the game is that Gardner-Webb plays a fast style of basketball like we do, and at times it gave Tennessee troubles. Big thing I noticed is that you do not want to drive to the basket and force a shot in the paint against this Tennessee team. They're physical, they are big. So, and that's what Gardner-Webb did a lot, and that's kind of why they started to struggle in the second half. They were forcing shots, they were just beating their man. But when they succeeded, or at least when they got open looks, they didn't shoot the ball well from 3, was when they got into the paint and they kicked, and then they swung and then open 3. Tennessee was packing it in. When guys were getting in the paint, there were multiple dudes in the paint. Guys were locked in on that driver, and there were kickouts that were open. So I think that makes me hopeful for this Louisville game, because we have seen us do it so well in the 4 exhibitions in the 1 regular season game, is that we have guys that don't force the ball. They're not Trey White. They get the ball in the paint, and then they look for that open shooter and the swing pass, and they get the perfect shot. So I think that's one way that we can really, really have an effective offensive game plan against this team. I think the biggest thing is Tennessee's obviously got Zakai Ziegler, but it's the transfers. They brought in some lower level transfer guys, not in the fact of their talent, but where they played at. And I think those are the dudes that are going to most affect this game.
Yeah. I mean, and it's about how can those guys adjust to a step up in competition, a step up in play, week in and week out. Getting a chance to get acclimated around Zakai Ziegler, a guy that had 9 assists in the season opener, is definitely a privilege that they're probably enjoying. Chaz Lanier, a guy that's a transfer big guard from North Florida, a guy that we spoke about in the offseason as we're trying to figure out who Pat Kelsey and the staff were going to use to kind of round out and fill in this roster. Igor Milicic, no relation to Darko, from Charlotte. They have Felix Okpara from Ohio State, a guy that, is kind of a guy that's going to get in there and clean up the glass a little bit. And then they did bring in Darlinstone DeBar from Hofstra. We talked about this just before he came on, Jake. Did not play in game 1. Sounds like he's sitting out for personal reasons. played 6 minutes in their exhibition game against Indiana, and as of right now, as of Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, it sounds like he's probably not going to be playing at Louisville. So we'll see how that affects them as a team. Definitely, I wouldn't say a rocky start, but definitely not what I expected. I actually had that underdog fantasy pick 'em going and won on everything that I had on Monday night, with the exception of Tennessee more than 20. Tennessee more points. So that is one thing that's going to be something to watch. Is Tennessee able to kind of turn it around from kind of a lackluster season opener? Dropped a game by 4 points against Indiana in an exhibition game. Love that they're doing these exhibition games, Jake. Like quality of Power Five opponents in this day and age. I'm trying to think of what was the big one that I saw. Was it Arizona and somebody? There was a huge exhibition
Duke,
game.
yeah, I know Duke played Arizona State. That was a molly
Yeah, Duke,
weapon.
Arizona State. Yeah, so it was interesting. They've been doing these secret scrimmages for a while, but people just straight up come out and said, we might as well take advantage of, being able to play some exhibition games and actually play somebody that's going to give us a preview of what, we're actually bringing to the table. Who else was it? Arkansas lost to, who did Arkansas play? They lost to
Oh,
somebody.
yeah, they did. They lost somebody. I can't remember who it is.
It's going to bother
They,
me now, but I'm trying to think. Another big name program knocked off Arkansas in their final exhibition game sometime last week. So uh, as we're preparing for this game, what should
TCU,
fans know?
TCU. How did I forget that? It's
TCU,
TCU.
yeah,
That's
come on,
embarrassing.
dude. Yeah, I know.
I'm
You
a
got
Louisville fan, 99%, 1% TCU fan. So forgive me there.
yeah, yeah. TCU grad Jake Hook.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, you grad. Yeah, that's right. You graduated from TCU, right?
Yes. But
Yeah.
Arkansas
So
beat Kansas in an exhibition, which Kansas is the number one team in the nation, and then they lost to TCU, which TCU is solid, but that's kind of crazy.
yeah, I mean it's hard to really take any like even playing a higher level team. I'm sure in exhibitions coaches are going to try things that they wouldn't typically
Yeah, yeah.
try. So, um, um, and then as we're getting into this game too, I'm going to be interested to see what the whistle is like. You mentioned there's a lot of ticky tacky fouls, but I often think in the early season that refs, they have these things that they're told to focus on as the season starts. For a few years now, it's been you get two hands on a player no matter what, it's supposed to be a foul. Oftentimes they don't call it. Shout out, like Peyton Seaver, Russ Smith era of Louisville basketball, where you can sneakily get two hands on a guy and they don't call it. But for whatever reason, it seems like the whistle is much tighter as the season starts because refs are still kind of getting acclimated to the flow of the game once again, the night in and night out of officiating a basketball game. And they're also worried about, job security and focusing on what they're told to focus on as the season starts. So I'm interested to see, Jake, with Tennessee definitely having an advantage in the size department, what that could look like for Louisville, especially with the way that some of these early season games are being officiated. So that'll be something to watch. But overall, what do you think about Tennessee's style of play and how that matches up with Louisville? I know we mentioned, the fact that they didn't do super well with that run and gun style of offense. What is this going to look like for Louisville fans who haven't seen Tennessee up close and personal?
Yeah, I mean they're not the Tennessee of a few years ago where they were just
Hmm.
like the most physical team in all of college basketball and were scoring
Hmm.
like 62 points a game, but they were winning a lot. They're
Yeah.
more like Tennessee from last year where they still play physical defense, but they have offensive superstars. I think the big thing for me is Chaz Lanier is Dalton Connect. I think he shot 6 threes, 8 threes in the first game. He averaged like
Mhm.
7.5 threes last year on North Florida. So like I think they're going to try and play the same way they played last year, physical on defense, big on the inside, and then get the shots off from their top three players, from Chaz Lanier, from a guy like Zakai Ziegler, people like that. So I think that's what we're going to see. Um, God, Zakai Ziegler is such a good college basketball player and will
He's
not
very
translate
good.
to the professionals because he's 5'9", 160, and he can't shoot that well. So I think that's going to be a huge matchup right there. And thankfully, we have Chucky Hepburn. So I'm not
I was
super
gonna
worried about
say.
it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with a guy like Zakai Ziegler, you let him shoot. He's going to facilitate. He's going to get a 6, 7, 8 assist a game, but let him shoot when he wants to shoot. He's a career 33% shooter. He's going to make some, but if you let him shoot, he will take it, and more likely than not, he's going to miss it. So I think leaving him open for shots and not a guy like Chaz Lanier is a good idea.
Yeah, so you have Zakai Ziegler, Chucky Hepburn. It's naturally a matchup that everybody should be watching for. Chucky Hepburn, again, one of the best defenders in college basketball over the last 3 seasons. Nothing has changed as he's moved over to Louisville. He's an absolute dog on defense. Again, just to reemphasize, Zakai Ziegler, 9 assists in their season opener. He's a guy that can get in the lane, really, kind of as you put it, Jake. I love this. Shout out Jeff Greer. Stirs the drink. Love that. And then Chaz Lanier. I'm interested to see, if Louisville's going to straight man, as we think that they will. Who's going to match up with Chaz Lanier? A big guard, a guy who is kind of can do a little bit of everything, but he loves to let it fly from deep. Shot 44% a season ago at North Florida. Who's going to be the guy or the guys that are kind of keying in on Chaz Lanier on defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think Terrence Edwards is a perfect matchup. Size-wise, they're pretty similar. Terrence has the athleticism to not let him get
Hmm.
by him and also has the length to contest the shots. But I think it's gonna be a team effort there. It's gonna take a lot of off-ball communication because they are trying to get him looks. Like they are setting multiple off-ball screens to get him a
Hmm.
three-point shot. So less than it being just one guy, it's just gonna take a team effort of communication on switching or hedging off-ball screens, things like that until your man gets back. I think that's what it's going to take. Another guy I'm worried about for Tennessee, Felix Akpara.
Hmm.
Not the most talented dude, but definitely one of the fucking biggest. Like
Yeah.
6'11", probably 230 at least. So that's a guy that
Hmm.
worries me. Averaged more than 2 blocks a game last year at Ohio State. So he is just like traditional big man. Maybe score 6, 8 points, grab 8, 10 rebounds, block 2 shots. So I'm curious to see as Louisville finally gets what I would say is their first real division 1 big man test in Felix Akpara, and then also Igor Milicic. We talked about him a
Hmm.
little bit. 6'10", a 3, a 4, as you can tell by the last name, European dude from Croatia. And we talked about it earlier. Plays like a European dude, like makes
Hmm.
the right passes, doesn't force anything, can shoot from the mid range, can shoot from 3. So he worries me a little bit. Averaged 13 points a game last year at Charlotte. He played more as like a big for Charlotte, but in the game that I
Hmm.
watched against Gardner Webb, he was more of a wing. He was slashing, he was getting to the middle, making good passes, attacking the rim, doing those things. So I think those are probably the 3, 4 biggest offensive threats that we're going to have to worry about with this Tennessee team.
Yeah, so Tennessee only went 9 deep against Gardner Webb. Igor Milicic only 17 minutes as a starter, and I think that was more of just a personnel decision than anything. He wasn't in foul trouble or anything. 8 points on 3 of 6 from the field, 4 rebounds, and 1 assist. Um, you know, really will be a good test for him to see if he's going to be able to acclimate well. Kind of coming to the next level, coming from Charlotte. Anybody else that's really standing out on this roster to you? I'm looking at Cade Phillips, the 6'9" sophomore out of Jacksonville, Alabama. That's probably a guy that was playing a little bit in Igor Milicic's place. 20 minutes, 7 points on 3 of 6 from the field and 4 rebounds. So literally the same stat line as Igor. So um, you know, big
Yeah, I
Igor.
was
That
going to.
also reminds me of the Russian bodyguard for who is that? The machine, Bert Kreischer. My
Yeah,
name
he
is
sounds like
Igor.
he sounds
Fuck
like a villain.
you.
He sounds like a
Yeah.
villain in a John Wick movie.
Yes, he does. Yeah, he sounds like a guy that would kill a dog. I'm just kidding,
Yeah.
Igor. We love you.
Yeah, the only guy I was going to say that stood out, not really last year. He only averaged 6 points a game for him. Jordan Gainey. He transferred in last year to Tennessee, came off the bench, played 20-ish minutes a game. Solid guy. Nothing you would nothing you would write home about. But and against Gardner-Webb, off the bench, played nearly 30 minutes, which was, I think, second or third most on the team behind Zakai Ziegler and Chaz Lanier. But he put up 16 points, not really a whole lot else, 2 rebounds and an assist. But just a guard off the bench that can score like that is certainly a threat. But again, if we're matching up with Corin Johnson, I don't feel too bad about that. I will say Darlinstone Dubar, the transfer from Hofstra, was all CAA, I believe, averaged 18 points a game. We talked about him. We don't think he's going to play, but he's not hurt. He's just dealing with personal issues. So, I mean, he could literally come out on Saturday morning and say, Dubar's playing.
Right.
And so that's one guy that if he does play, that's a huge thing. I think the biggest thing in this one is just Tennessee, like we said, decided to go with some lower tier transfers that put up crazy numbers at Charlotte, at Hofstra, at North Florida. So just seeing if those players are able to translate against a team like Louisville as opposed to a team like Gardner-Webb.
So you're going to love this. I put out some feelers, texted Jacob and Romy separately at the exact same time for score predictions. And they both texted me back at the exact same time and said 77-73. Both of them. But Romy has Tennessee winning 77-73. Jacob has Louisville winning 77-73. If you had to put a number on it, do you think that's about the range of what these two teams are going to score?
I don't know. I think if Louisville is to win this game, it's more likely to be on the offensive end. So I think if it's a Louisville victory, which I think that it will be, I think it'll probably be more like 84-ish points, somewhere around there to like Tennessee 79 or something like that. Just a wild guess, but if you're making me throw out a score prediction, I'd say 84-79.
Yeah, I'm going to go in this one. I'm going to go 89-81. Because I think, it's like we talked about earlier. I think Tennessee is going to be able to kind of have their way on the boards at times. I think that Louisville's free throw issues are not something that they're going to be able to just shake off in one game. It's too much of a trend at this point. So I think that that's kind of what keeps Tennessee a little bit closer, is that rebounding and the free throw aspect. I know if you're a Tennessee fan or a Kentucky fan or a fan of not of Louisville that hasn't been paying much attention, it's probably comes as a surprise that Louisville fans are just cavalierly throwing out that we expect to win this game. And I'm not going to say that I expect to win. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if they lose. I wouldn't even be like, mildly surprised, right? But I have confidence in the trajectory of the program. I have confidence in where Louisville is versus where Tennessee is. It feels like Louisville's assimilated as a team so much better, and they just have so much better of a game plan. It just feels like right now that Louisville being at home is seizing all of the momentum. I feel pretty confident in a Louisville win, and I think that it will be, it won't come down to the buzzer or anything like that. Like, I think that Tennessee will put some pressure on them. It'll be a good, close game. But I think that this is, Pat Kelsey's chance to really put this program back on the map, to solidify Louisville as a contender in the ACC, as a contender nationally. I have no problem predicting Louisville to win this game. And I'm not going to say that I expect them to win, but I think that there's a higher probability that Louisville wins this game than Tennessee. And I'm going to be interested to see, I know that we're underdog fantasy people, but I am interested to see just when Vegas puts out their odds, what the game, what the line looks like. Are you expecting Tennessee to be favored?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, just with the lack of knowledge from most of the people outside of Louisville fandom of how good I think this Louisville team is, and the fact Tennessee's ranked 12th in the nation, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know if the lines came out. I'd probably predict Tennessee -6.5, -5.5, -7.5, somewhere in there. I think the big thing that I'm going to look for in this game is, does Louisville's offensive fluidity translate to this next step up in competition? Because we've seen them be able to really get whatever they want, get to the paint, swing, 21 assists on 32 made baskets. So if that offensive style, if our talent can translate to this step up in competition, then I think we win this one easily. I think how we lose is, one, if the offense isn't looking great, Two, if we're not shooting, if we have an 11 for, 32 night, like we did on Monday, it's going to be a lot closer of a game than it should be. Tennessee's going to be super physical, so I'm worried that could slow down our offense and how smooth we've looked and how easy everything has came so far, and just the fact that they're big. I mean, they do have an opportunity to dominate us on the glass. So those are the things that concern me a little bit, just Tennessee's size and physicality, really.
We do have some predictions from Kim Palm. Number one, we finally have a game in the books, which means that Kim Palm statistics are, the real nitty gritty, the breakdown of Louisville basketball is starting to begin. Now, I don't know how much last year or expected totals or anything like that comes into play. Like, I'm sure it factors in a little bit. I don't think that they're just going to take a 1-game sample size and just run with that. Right now, Ken Palm has Louisville at 59th in adjusted offensive efficiency and 47th in adjusted defensive efficiency. Louisville took the biggest jump overall in Ken Palm after game one, after night one of college basketball. Really, to nobody's surprise, that's been kind of paying attention, because the statistics really have just been showing Louisville to be like a 60 to 120th type of team this season. I think if you watch this team and you have a good feel for college basketball and a good feel for the direction this program's heading in, I think that it's I look at it much more optimistically than that. Some interesting stats. Louisville's average possession length is 4th in the country at 13.1 seconds per possession. Ken Palm has that as a bad thing, but I think that's what Louisville wants to do. Average length of possession for the opponent so far, 18.6 seconds. Effective field goal percentage. Louisville limited Morehead State to 26.0 effective field goal position, but effective field goal percentage in game one, which has Louisville at number 1 in the country right now in effective field goal percentage defense. They are 100th in effective field goal percentage offensively so far. Turnover percentage, Louisville's 2nd in the country at 6.7 turnover percentage per possession, and 10th in the country at 28.2 turnover percentage forced, which, again, fantastic. Some other numbers that stand out: steal percentage, 1.3 steal percentage. That's good for 2nd in the country. Anything else that's really standing out here? Not a whole heck of a lot. We'll dive into that a lot more as we get into things. We also have minutes of continuity, 0.2% minutes of continuity, which is one of the worst in the country. Average height. Louisville is 45th in the country in average height, which is a bit surprising. There's not a lot of weight on a lot of these guys, but we do have a lot of tall dudes. So, and then 2 foul participation. Good Lord. 0.8%, 127th in the country. Now, as we're breaking down Louisville versus Tennessee, Ken Palm has already, shrunk Louisville's expected loss margin to 1 point. So his projection has Tennessee winning 76-75, giving Louisville a 46% chance of winning. So that is, I don't know if I have any screenshots or anything from Ken Palm prior to the season, but I do believe that has changed significantly, even after just one game. Breaking down Tennessee very quickly on in Ken Palm, adjusted offensive efficiency, they're 33rd in the country. Defensive efficiency, they're 7th. Average possession length, 15.5 seconds, allowing 20.0 seconds on defense. So we said, Gardner-Webb tried to play that running gun style, but they were holding onto the ball quite a bit, so they weren't really allowing Gardner-Webb to assert their dominance. Nothing really that stands out too much so far on the Tennessee side of things. So we'll have to recrunch the numbers here in the coming weeks, but just some interesting stuff from the man himself, Ken Popo. Any thoughts or takeaways from that, Jake?
Not much. I was actually just curious. Do you think there's any 1 or 2 Louisville players that you think have to have a good game in order for? I mean, obviously we have 10 guys that can,
That's
so it
a
doesn't matter. But is there
fantastic
anyone
question.
that you think has to?
Yeah, so this feels like a real Chucky Hepburn, I'm him type of moment, right? Like Chucky just again so quietly goes about his business. It feels like they've played literally one game, and it feels like some of these guys have been here for a while, right? Like they just have that requisite experience that you like to see in a winning college basketball team. So I think Chucky Hepburn number one. I think that James Scott, as we suggested, you got to stay out of foul trouble, James. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think that those are two guys that really stand out to me that really you need to see a good, efficient game from both of them. And Chucky steps up in big games, man. That was kind of his MO at Wisconsin. He was just a steady Eddie, but when he was needed at Wisconsin, he always stepped up in big games against Big Ten competition. And then obviously Kason Pryor, he feels like really the motor that makes this team go. And so I'm just excited to see what that looks like when he's in front of 20,000 plus people. It's a lot of these guys are not played in front of a crowd supporting them like this before, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I'm expecting maybe a tech or two in this game. I'm expecting Tennessee to try to make it a little bit chippier. That's just kind of the MO of the squad. Who's standing out to you that you think you need to see a big game from?
I agree with you 100% on Chucky. He's going to be matched up against Zakai Ziegler for probably 25 minutes this game, maybe even 30, depending on how
Mm-hmm.
the rotations change in a bigger game.
Mm-hmm.
If he can force Zakai Ziegler to shoot bad shots or just let him shoot threes, and he isn't able to get 8+ assists in the game, I think that's going to be huge. I think James Scott on Felix Okpara, the guy we talked about, 6'11", 230. That's a huge
Mm-hmm.
one. Felix Okpara isn't going to score a ton. That's not where he's going to make a difference. It's going to be on the glass. So if James Scott can keep him off the glass and can maybe be effective on offense with his speed and agility that's better than Okpara's, I think the biggest guy to me that sticks out is Terrence Edwards. The offense
Yeah.
has come so easy to us in these 4, now 5 games that we've seen. It won't be that easy against Tennessee. There will be moments where we're not shooting 13 seconds into the shot clock. We're shooting 25 seconds. We're shooting 28 seconds into the shot clock. And I think Terrence Edwards is the guy that is likely going to get the ball and is likely going to be able to hit those tough shots that aren't just easy swing, wide open three, penetrate the lane, dunk for James Scott. So I think that he's going to have to be able to hit those shots. And I think that he will, but I think that's going to be a huge role that has to be filled by most likely him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that key matchup of Zakai Ziegler against Chucky Hepburn. Zakai Ziegler against Gardner Webb. 13 points in 33 minutes on 3 of 10 from the field. 6 of those 10 field goals were from three. 0 of those 3-point field goals went into the basket. So, like you said, if you're Chucky Hepburn, really you're trying to deny Zakai Ziegler from making plays for others. I think that's really
Mm-hmm.
the key. And then, when you're talking about their other guard, specifically Chaz Lanier, that's a guy that you want to run off the 3-point line as much as possible. I'd look for a guy like Rain Smith to want to kind of go tat for tat with a guy like Chaz Lanier. This is kind of, to me, feels like a game where you could see Rain play 18 minutes and get off 11 threes type of thing. Obviously, Tennessee is going to do the same thing. They have a Hall of Fame coach on the sidelines in Rick Barnes. So, they're going to come prepared. They're going to know, what each guy's strengths and weaknesses are. And they're going to try to do the same thing and run Rain Smith off the line. The key there, though, is that I've never seen somebody with such confidence behind a 3-point line. Like he is not afraid to pull at any time, and he does so quickly. But I mean, Rain is also just like a wily, savvy veteran. And I don't want to put him into this like Ryan McMahon type box where we're just like, yeah, if he's not making threes, take him out of the game. Like I think that Rain Smith is a guy that we're not, harping on enough as potentially being like a major game changer for this team and for this program. When you look at when you look at Ken Palm, he breaks down Louisville's go-to guys as Kason Pryor and Connie Ruth so far. So
Heck yeah,
if you're asking,
Kanai, let's go.
yeah, Kanai, I'm sorry. Yeah, how about that? So not obviously the smallest possible sample size, but still funny. He has James Scott and Frank Anselm eBay as the quote unquote major contributors. And then
Yep.
the role players as Terrence Edward, Rain Smith, Javon Hadley, and Noah Waterman, and limited role Chucky Hepburn, Abubakar Traore, and Corin Johnson. So
Wow.
definitely not like the best indicator of of what's going on, on this squad, if you will. But still interesting to see how they position these different guys. For Tennessee, just for shits and gigs, um, you have Zakai Ziegler is listed as their go-to guy. So that's greater than 28% of the possessions that he was in used. And then Chaz Lanier and Igor Milicic as the significant contributors. So I think there's checks out a little bit more. When you're looking over Louisville's most frequent used lineups. So the number one most frequent used lineup was Chucky Hepburn, Terrence Edwards, Javon Hadley, Abubakar Traore, and Kaysen Pryor. So basically, right, that's the starters,
Yeah, but
except for
James
if you
without
swap
James
in
Scott.
Kaysen. Correct.
Hmm.
The funniest part of this entire thing is Louisville's second most used lineup right now. You would never guess. We'd sit here for 30 minutes and you wouldn't be able to guess it. The
Is it just
second most used,
is it the scrubs at the end of the game?
it's the walk-ons. It's the second most used
Yeah.
lineup, which is just so indicative of the style of coaching and play of Pat Kelsey,
Mhm.
right? Patrick Antonelli, Aiden McCool, Cole Sherman, Kanai Roos, and Frank Anselmibe is the second most used lineup on this roster right now. So that's fantastic. Again, this is all stuff that we'll check in a little bit more as we're going forward. But yeah, as you're looking forward to this game, I mean, soak it in, Louisville fans. I mean, you have a top 12 Tennessee team coming in. You're going to have a packed crowd. The environment's going to be raucous. It's going to be a fantastic time. Jake, any more thoughts before we get out of here?
I mean, this is the most excited I've been for a Louisville game since the tournament got canceled for
Yeah,
COVID, or I
I'd
guess
say so.
before that, I guess the Duke game that we blew, or the Michigan game, the whiteout with Chris Mack. Like this is up there. I mean, this is such a big
Yeah,
game. If we can win, we put the whole entire college basketball landscape on notice. Even if we lose in a close game, there's still going to be a lot of people that are like, wait, this isn't 8-win Louisville. So I think it's just a huge
right.
opportunity for Louisville to get back into the top of the college basketball landscape.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. And as we said this in what, June or July, right? You get Tennessee at home, second game of the season. It's an opportunity to really just show what you're made of and prove to the country that you are officially back, even if it's in a close loss. I think that nobody's going to necessarily hold that against them having 13 new players on this roster and whatever it is, 17 new coaches that Pat Kelsey has on the staff. So um, that's what I'm looking forward to the most is just having that feeling, the pregame nervousness and jitters of playing a top 10 or 15 team and the environment that comes with Louisville basketball in the KFC Yum Center. Until next time, I'm Presley Meyer. That's Jake Hook. You can follow us on the X at Press Meyer, at U of L _updates, at the State of Blue, at Starting 502. And until next time, let's get out of here and go Cards.